chug, 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 chug,
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Wizard Staff Podcast. I'm your host, Blake.
And I'm Kai.
And we are two drunk novices who like to talk about EDH. We do drink and swear, so you've been warned. Please drink responsibly when playing children's card games. Tonight, we're back at it again for another set review. Alright, this time it's Dragonstorm, like the return of Tarkir. I think people are pretty hyped for this one, so we wanted to talk about it. I mean, what can I say? Like, people really love dragons.
I mean, it's the number one reason why I got into Magic. And since we're not going to be doing any Universes Beyond set reviews, you know, we can kind of appreciate these sets more.
Exactly. So it's like, oh, we might not record a set review for like half a year, so we should probably do Dragonstorm.
Yeah, the next one will be Edges of Eternity, the space set. And I don't think that'll come out until September, so
yeah,
we'll have a long gap of like no card reviews for us at least.
Right, so for all of you listening, Guy and I are sitting down. We're breaking up this set review into two parts. Part one is going to be we're dividing it specifically into part one being non-dragon cards and part two being all the dragon cards. You know, we want to save the good part for like last, right? And I know normally we try and do like, oh, commanders in one episode and cards that go in the 99, but we're like, fuck it, we're gonna change things up a bit. Let's have some fun with this.
Hell yeah.
After we have discussed that, then probably around late April, later this month, we expect a commander format announcement by Wizards of the Coast, like the first like official one they've really made, and everyone's kind of like been speculating of like what they're going to unban or probably change for rules, and so it's like it's going to be exciting, and we're going to talk about it whatever happens, and probably talk a little bit about the bracket system and how it's been going since its launch a couple months ago. And yeah, but that's for the future. For now, in this part one, we are going to be discussing the non-dragon cards. But before we do that, Guy, what are we drinking?
So I've been really into orange wines recently, and I just have an orange wine. It is kind of a mix between a white wine and like a red wine almost, in terms of, you know, it's not too deep like a red wine, but it's got a bit of a citrus flavor. It's a little more refreshing like a white wine, and it's pretty good. I enjoy this trend, and I hope that get to drink more.
Okay, I've never had an orange. You said it was a wine?
Yes, an orange wine.
So I'm guessing that means instead of grapes, it's from an orange, and if it's from a wine, it's also like 40-ish% alcohol by volume?
40's pretty high. I think it's closer to like 18 or 20.
Okay.
That's more typical for a wine.
Oh yeah, you can tell I drink a whole lot of wine. I'm mixing it up with hard liquor. Okay, that makes sense. All right, Yeah, maybe I'll have it sometime. I've never tried an orange wine. And it's not like orange juice. It's like only like a little bit citrusy.
Yes, it's not too citrusy.
Okay, so it's not like drinking OJ or anything like that. Okay.
No. What are you drinking?
In contrast, I am having what, in comparison, feels like a kid drink. It is, for those of you who are familiar with the Seattle area, you may have heard of Jones Soda brand. And they have released their alcoholic series called Spiked Jones, and they have a couple different flavors. This one I am drinking is grape flavored, and it is 8.4 alcohol by volume, and it very much tastes like a grape soda with a little bit of harshness to it. Yeah, so I don't think it's my favorite of like alcohols that I've had, but I saw it in the store and I'm like, that's new, never had that before, wanted to try it.
Nice.
Alright, so with that all out of the way, let's get everybody up to speed. You may be like, what's a Tarkir? I've never heard of it. What's a Dragonstorm? Never heard of it either. So, here's what you need to know. Years and years ago, there was a plane of magic called Tarkir. This was back in like the old school block structure where there was Khans of Tarkir, then there was Fate Reforged, and then Dragons of Tarkir. I'm not going to get into the storyline of it. That's beyond the scope of what this podcast does. There's lots of other lore-based podcasts out there that you can listen to that are much better and great. But we are basically returning to that plane, the plane of Tarkir. It is a very dragon-focused set with the humanoid inhabitants of that plane as well. The set is structured around wedged colored clans. That's one of the exciting things about this set as well, is that it's like 3-color. One of the few sets of Magic that's known for their 3-color cards. And then there's also a light dragon typal theme, which is why like half of this set review is going to be about dragons. As well as some new type of card like called Omen Spells, and as well as the Behold mechanic that are related to dragons, but we'll get there in a minute. Another thing to know is, like, if you do care about the lore, Dragonstorm is like the conclusion of like the Dragonstorm arc narrative, which again we're not going to get into right now, but it's basically like a self-contained story. We're going to move into the mechanics, and again we're not going to spend a whole lot of time in mechanics, but again we want to get everybody up to speed and be like, oh, Tarkir came out like 2 years ago. What was that all about again? We're going to get you up to speed. So, Dragonstorm delivers like both dragons and the 3-color clan wedge cards. Unlike Khans of Tarkir, the wedges of the renewed clans are centered more around the enemy color, with the caveat that they have the same general flavor as the original versions of the clans, which is influenced by like the old center color. You know, if you look at the back of a magic card, it's got the like pentagram of colors, and like based on like how you group them, their enemy or allied colors, you know. So that being said, the clan's central colors could be switched since they no longer had to match any ally color dragon brood. Each clan features a new mechanic inspired by the clan mechanics of Khans of Tarkir way back in the day. So there's the Obzon. They have the Endure mechanic, an ability that ensures their forces will steadily grow, and whenever a creature endures X, its controller puts X +1/+1 counters on it, or creates X white spirit creature token. So it's +1/+1 counters or making tokens. I don't think we really have that many Endure cards on here, but we'll still say it for simplicity's sake. Then there's the Jeskai, which have Flurry, an ability that rewards striking at the right time. A Flurry ability triggers whenever you cast your second spell each turn. I'm going to let you know now, in the commander format, it's pretty easy to cast more than one spell each turn. So it's a bit more relevant than I think some of these other ones. Then there's the Sultai Brood, which have the Renew mechanic, an ability that allows even the dead to contribute their strength even after they're gone. So the Renew ability can only be activated from the graveyard and require you to exile the card with the ability. So it's kind of like Flashback, kind of. There's the Mardu, which have Mobilize, an ability that encourages aggression. So whenever a creature with Mobilize X attacks, its controller creates X 1/1 red warrior creature tokens that are tapped and attacking, but are sacrificed during the end step. So aggression, deal the damage with some small little stuff, and then they go away. Then there's the Teamer, which have Harmonize, which, spoiler alert, Harmonize, pretty good. We're going to talk about some of those. An ability which rewards strength with wisdom. Harmonize is the same as Flashback, but the alternate cost is always higher. However, you can reduce it by X by tapping a creature you control with X power, sort of like Convoke. So Harmonize is sort of like Flashback, half Convoke. Go figure, pretty strong in Commander. Nevertheless, moving on. There is a new dragon-centric mechanic called Behold. This is a cost you can pay by choosing a permanent you control or revealing a card from your hand with some special quality, usually it being a dragon. Next up, we have Storm. That's right. We have the return of Storm. We're going to talk about one of those cards coming up because turns out Storm's pretty busted in Commander. Then we also have stuff like Suspend and Delve and Returning, which kind of are pretty well-known things in Commander. Notably, Morph, which played a prominent role in the original block, is not in the set. And I think everyone's kind of fine with that. Nobody's like, oh, they don't have Morph. Nobody's sad about that. Nobody's complaining about that. Moving right along, there's a couple of card types. Like I mentioned earlier, there is Omen, a new subtype for instants and sorceries, which appear in the text box of creatures. They look very similar to adventure cards, if you remember way back in, Eldraine. Like, there were the adventure cards that were like creatures, but also like instants and sorceries. And Omens are a lot like that, where I think for now it's like there's dragon spells, but they also have like this instant sorcery going on. And that's because like it's just sort of what needed to happen for Wizards of the Coast to like make dragon cards, but like not like ruin like the draft environment and like make it playable. It's a bunch of nitty-gritty stuff of why they did it, but I'm not going to get into that right now. The set also features a cycle of sagas. I'm not sure we're really going to talk about any of them, but they're there. And then there's counters, notably decayed counters, which I think there's like one or two cards we'll talk about later. But I don't want to focus on that. There's like a few reprints, notably like, I think this is like the only big one, like Craterhoof Behemoth. It's now like this mossy looking elephant with a bunch of tusks, and love him or hate him, he's here and he's helping make this card more affordable. There's also the reprints of the Ultimatum cycle, which everyone's been pretty stoked on because the Ultimatums are pretty like big, they're pretty epic. They've got these like intense color pip heavy casting costs that just really coincide with like some beautiful artwork of these like spirit dragons. And also there's reprints of some fetch lands, right guy? Like, which were original to the Tarkir. Like, that's when fetch lands first came out. Like, fetch lands are a big deal in the history of Magic in general. So like to see these reprints, it's like, nostalgia.
I actually don't think that they were first printed in Tarkir. I think they had their first reprint into Standard with Tarkir, and that was actually notably the Allied fetch lands, where this is the enemy fetch lands. So it's the ones that have not been on Tarkir before, but they have new special artwork. They're in the special guests, and it's great because this is the kind of slot where you can print them into your standard booster. They're not going to be standard legal, but now we can get more of these like really good reprints and help bring down the cost. So very glad to see these. It seems like similar to Shocklands, they're probably going to reprint them every other year just to make sure that their prices don't get way too crazy like they have been before.
Sure. Before I move on, how you feel about these reprints? Like, this is a new set. You don't really expect that many reprints. You expect maybe a few. I'd say these are pretty good choice.
I am really digging the Craterhoof reprint, mainly because Magali did this artwork, and she's one of my favorite artists. And then, again, really glad to see them do the fetch lands here. It's kind of been a while since Modern Horizons 2, I think. So here it's like, hey, you might open one every couple boosters. The ultimatums are nice. I think overall, very solid picks for the reprints that we got.
Yeah, I agree. All right, now that we've gotten the introduction for this set out of the way, now let's start talking about the non-dragon cards, specifically some of the commanders. And as always, we are going to go in WUBRG order, meaning we're going white, blue, black, red, green, and then colorless. And so, no time like the present. Let's just dive in. I'll start off here because I have a little bit of connection with this card. So this is Anafenza, Unyielding Lineage. It is 2 and a white for legendary creature, Spirit Soldier 2/2. It has flash and first strike. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, Anafenza endures 2. So remember, like whenever another non-token creature dies, Anafenza is putting 2 +1/+1 counters on it, or creating a 2/2 token. So this is comparable to like the very first iteration of like Spirit Anafenza. Like there was Anafenza Kintree Spirit, which is also a easy to cast small white creature. They do very similar things like, oh well, your thing enters or your thing is dying. It gives you like some counters. This one gives you the choice of counters or a token, whereas the original Anafenza was just +1/+1 counters. You know, it seems to fit. I don't think it's an incredibly strong card. I like that it has flash. I don't think it's going to see a whole lot of play, but I wanted to still mention it.
I think it's fine. I like that it has flash, so you can be responsive, and you know, if a board wipe's about to happen, you can maybe like flash this in. You know, whenever another non-token creature dies, Anafenza endures 2, so you know, board wipe, flash this in, a bunch of creatures might die, you might be able to create a bunch of 2/2 spirits. So it seems more like a 99 card than it is a actual
Leader
build your
of
deck
commander.
around commander.
Yeah, it's similar to the original Anafenza, where like it's hard to see it as like the head of a commander deck really closing out a game. You know, mono white is still kind of struggling to like win games in commander these days. That's it for white though. We're gonna move into blue.
Yeah, moving quickly. We got Taigum, Master Opportunist, 1 and a blue, so 2 mana. Legendary creature, human monk, and it has Flurry, so whenever you cast your second spell each turn, copy it, then exile that spell you cast with 4 time counters on it. If it doesn't have Suspend, it gains Suspend. So basically, the second spell you cast, you get to copy it, so you still get 1 right away, but then that second spell you cast will get to be played again at another point. So, you know, I think the best kinds of cards that you want to be trying to cast on your second, or for, you know, during your turn at least, probably are like creatures, so you can like double up on creatures later on. Probably not a ton of like responsive spells, like counter spells and stuff like that. But
maybe more like,
you know,
Ponder
it is also
like
yeah, Ponder, Ancestral Visions, things like that. What was I gonna say? Oh, the nice thing is it's your second spell each turn. It really, any kind of spell, doesn't have to be non-creature. So I like how less restrictive this mechanic is. And you're right, it is very easy to do in Commander. Like this is, you could totally have this be like your Commander. It comes out very early. Yeah, I think this is pretty strong.
Yeah, piggybacking on what you were just saying, like I feel like as a Commander, it's quite an engine card where you can just start playing lots of simple low mana value things, and then as the game goes into the mid and late game, you're just like casting spell after spell after spell after spell, because there's all this stuff that's been suspended early on and you're getting tons of value. I can also see this being in the 99, you know, whether it's in the 99 of a mono blue deck, which, you know, there's exceptions, but they tend to be very instance and sorcery heavy, which can easily cast multiple spells a turn. But even if it's like in a like the 99 of a multicolored deck, like this slots in with so many strategies. I think this is pretty strong.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, next up, we are moving into black. I know it may seem like we're blazing through this stuff, but don't worry, folks. We're going to be here a while. There's a lot of cards, and we are just trying to go through at a reasonable pace. So, this one is Sidisi, Regent of the Mire. It is only 1 and a black, so only 2 mana. It is a legendary creature, Zombie Snake Warlock, for 1 and a... It's a 1/3. And then it says, tap. Sacrifice a creature you control with mana value X other than Sidisi. Return target creature card with mana value X +1 from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. So, a lot of words going on, but what you need to know is this is basically a black creature that has, like, reanimation birthing pod. Like, everyone kind of knows, like, the original birthing pod, how it would sacrifice a creature and get you, like, one from the deck to field that was X +1 of, like, its, like, casting cost or something. And since then, there have been iterations on that design. There's been Synthesis Pod. More recently, just recently in Aether Drift, there was Repurposing Bay, which is like this blue artifact that gets other, like, does the birthing pod effects for other artifacts. Now we have this mono black Sidisi creature, which is basically like a black reanimator effect within that templating, which is pretty strong, especially in certain reanimator strategies. It's easy to cast only 2 mana. Do I see this more as a commander or in the 99? Probably more in the 99. I also think that it's cool to see Sidisi again. You know, we've seen Sidisi Brood Tyrant and Sidisi Undead Vizier, both of which see a reasonably high amount of play in the commander format, and I think this one will too.
Yeah, I mean, I think your analysis is pretty spot on. I like that it can, you know, I like the restriction of it having to be 1 more mana than the creature, you know, so it's not like you do have to do like a little setup. It's not just like, hey, let me just grab something from my graveyard. You kind of have to, you know, do probably quite a bit of self-milling. And yeah, I also do like that you just don't have to, or you can't sacrifice the DC, so, you know, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, with that, we can move into red, yeah? And Guy, you're the perfect guy to take it away.
Yeah, it looks like we only did 1 commander for each color, so, you know, not bad.
Perfect.
Tursa Light Shatter, 2 red, legendary creature, Orc Wizard, haste. When Tursa enters, discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. Whenever Tursa attacks, if there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, exile a card at random from your graveyard. You may play that card this turn. I think very strong in the fact that, like, okay, gonna discard 2 cards, draw 2 cards, and then potentially get to play an additional card this turn. So it's almost like drawing 3 cards the turn you play this, if you do meet the condition of having 7 or more cards in your graveyard. But I think with cards like Faithless Looting, Gamble, the Reckless Handling, like Grab the Prize, there's a ton of like small red draw spells that are like, you know, as an additional cost, discard a card, discard 2 cards, Cathartic Reunion, Demand Answers, Tormenting Voice, Thrill Possibility. There's a ton. So I think if you load up your deck, play this, you know, you're going to be able to hit that 7 cards pretty quickly. And, you know, if you hit a draw spell from in the graveyard, like, that's pretty good too.
Do you see this more as a commander or more in the 99?
It's tough. I mean, I guess, like, you know, you're just kind of doing generic, like, draw, get to play maybe an extra card. That's your commander. So the commander isn't really, like, I guess, driving the strategy, so probably more of a 99 card. I think the other tough part, too, about this is, like, you know, if you are able to play the extra card because there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you do want to hold up mana, so hopefully it is something that is cheap and relatively easy to play. I'd say probably more of a 99 card just because it's generically good.
Alright.
Who's next?
Next, we are moving into green, and this is the return of Surok. This is Surok, Elusive Hunter, 2 and a green, for legendary creature, human warrior, 4/3. This spell can't be countered. It has trample. And whenever a creature you control, or a creature spell you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, draw a card. So there's a lot of things going on with this card. First off, like a few of these other cards you've noticed, like, oh, this is the 3rd iteration of blah 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 character. Like, in the past we've had Tarkir Dragonstorm, which is pretty good. We've had Surok the Hunt Caller, which is pretty good. We also technically had Surok and Goreclaw, one of those weird cards that like has 2 characters and is like the creature type on it is super weird because there's these 2 totally different types of characters. So you're like a human bear or something. Anywho, we see Surok again. This one's a little bit different than all the others. Notably, this spell can't be countered, which is like generally a pretty good upside. And I was thinking to myself, like, damn, like how many other cards, like what other cards are like that where it's like this spell can't be countered? And like I wanted to Scryfall, and I'm like, oh yeah, a fuck ton of good cards like Abrupt Decay, Allosaurus Shepherd, the Chandra Awakened Inferno, the one that's like that's at 6 and gets +2 and gives you like emblems that deal damage. There's like Counterflux, Demon Fire, Dovin's Veto, Band Emrakul, just a bunch of like, oh yeah, there's also fucking Hullbreaker Horror, just a lot of like really good cards. Oh yeah, both of the Comas, fuck me up. Just a lot of good cards that have this kind of effect. Niv Mizzet Perun, Obliterate, ugh. Anywho, it's always usually pretty good when a spell, when a card you have says like, oh, this can't be countered. Generally pretty good. And then this isn't the strongest draw engine in green, but it's very similar to an obscure enchantment that of course I know called like Shaper's Sanctuary, where it's basically like, okay, if you target any of my things, like yeah, you might be able to get rid of it, but like I'm gonna be drawing cards. And like it's not the most powerful draw engine effect in green, as I've said, but when you pair it with all of green's other draw engine effects, like depending on the color identity of the commander or the deck, like it's like, no matter what I do to this bitch, like they're drawing cards, and they're also drawing cards off of this Surok. So I don't know, like I know people aren't like talking much about this card, but like I'm like, you know, this is actually not half bad. This is kind of decent, whether it's the commander or on the 99.
Yeah, I do see this being more of a 99, like kind of like protection. I know that green has some similar abilities. I'm forgetting the one Stegosaurus card that is very similar, but yeah, I think, you know, pretty good to, you know, be able to like kind of protect your stuff, or at least get, you know, a card out of it. Okay, so we're done with the monocolors. Now we're moving on to the multicolors. These first couple are actually not 2 and 1 necessarily, but it's like one is one of the main commanders for a commander deck, and then one is in like the main set. So for example, this first one we have Zurgo Stormrender, red, white, black, legendary creature, orc warrior, has mobilize 1, so whenever this creature attacks, create a tapped and attacking 1/1 red warrior creature token, sacrifice it at the beginning of your next end step. And then whenever a creature token you control leaves the battlefield, draw a card. If it was attacking, draw a card if it was attacking. Otherwise, each opponent loses 1 life. And then there's also Zurgo Thunder's Decree, which is also red, white, black, legendary creature, orc warrior, mobilize 2. So whenever this creature attacks, you create 2 1/1 red warrior creature tokens tapped and attacking. Sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. But this says during your end step, warrior tokens you control have this token can't be sacrificed. So they're both kind of playing in a similar way, creating tokens that are attacking. So, you know, I think with white, There's the new Elspeth that we'll talk about later. There's like Mondrak, so you're creating a bunch of tokens off of that. You could also like replace it with like Anointed Procession, or I feel like there's another one. But yeah, I think the idea of the Mardu is just to go big, so being able to create extra combats, really hone in on capitalizing on these tapped and attacking tokens, which then you could use for like sacrifice abilities. You're in black and red, so like maybe using them for like a goblin bombardment or things like that. That's kind of where my head goes for these two.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, I always forget how good Goblin Bombardment is.
Yeah.
I mean, these are both pretty good. One, Storm Render can do a whole bunch of like life loss, and Thunder's Decree can like create a whole bunch of tokens that stick around. Like, both of them are easy to cast. Like, I could see myself being afraid of these cards.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next up we have, I think this is a new character, Eshki. So there's Eshki, there's Teemer's Roar, and then there's also Dragonclaw. So I'm going to read one at a time. Teemer's Roar is green, blue, red, Human Warrior 2/2 that says whenever you cast a creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on this. If that spell's power is 4 or greater, draw a card. If that spell's power is 6 or greater, Eshki is going to deal damage equal to Eshki's power to each opponent. So this one's really asking you to be really creature centric, so you can buff up Eshki. If it's big enough, you're going to draw cards, and if it's definitely big enough, it's also going to be dealing damage. Then there's also Eshki Dragonclaw, which is 1 green, blue, red, legendary creature, human warrior, 4/4, that has vigilance, trample, and ward 1. Ward 1, should never overlook it. Everyone always forgets when they try and go for spot removal, and then they're like, ah shit, it costs even more to get rid of this thing. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you've cast both a creature spell and a non-creature spell this turn, draw a card and put 2 +1/+1 counters on this Eshki. I think this one is going to be less popular just because you have to basically split your deck between both creature spells and non-creature spells, which generally speaking is going to make your deck less synergistic and like a little bit harder to build. It's not impossible, but again, this one's also drawing you cards and buffing up Eshki, but it doesn't also have the additional damage dealing if your creatures are super big in power, and it's one more to cast versus Teemer's Roar. So I'm just going to say it now, I think Teemer's Roar is going to be the more popular one.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think you're right with Eshki Dragonclaw, so the second one that you talked about, being able to split your deck, making sure that you're going to be hitting those. Yeah. I also think because the first one is one of the leads in the commander decks, that will just automatically be more popular because it's kind of easy to like open that up and have the deck ready to go.
Yep, that's definitely a factor. And I don't know, last thing I'll say is I bet we'll see more cards like Teemer's Roar, just because like we seem to be getting over the years we get a lot of like, if your creature's power is 4 or greater, draw a card. Like back in the day we had Elemental Bond, and then like as in more recent years we've gotten stuff like Garruk's Uprising, and what was it, OTJ, Outlaws Thunder Junction, there was Outcast Trailblazer, and now Eshki's Teemer's Roar. I just think we're going to see more and more of this design, so yeah, keep that in mind. I bet like there'll be more support cards in the 99 in the coming years.
Yeah. Alright, so we just did Mardu, Teemer, and now here is the Obzon. So we have Fellow Thar, Dawn of the Obzon, white, black, green. Legendary creature human warrior. This is the set version, so trample. Whenever Felifar enters or attacks, you may sacrifice a non-land permanent. When you do, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Felifar the Steadfast, so this is the one in the commander deck. 1 white, black, green, legendary creature human warrior. Each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. Creatures you control can attack as though they didn't have defender. And 3 in a tap, sacrifice another creature, draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness, then discard cards equal to its power. So, yeah, that's pretty good. I like the second one a lot more. I mean, it just has a lot more text.
You and the entire community, yep.
Yep. And I think, we've seen this kind of strategy with, big butts attack. So, you have like the wall type decks. And, this also says that creatures with defender can attack as though they didn't have defender. I'm just thinking of like some of the pretty egregious creatures that have like power toughness that are pretty far. Like Elish Norn comes to mind first. It's like a 4/7. I think, especially since the mechanic for this is the endure, so creating tokens. Actually, that wouldn't work with the new one, Mother of Machines. But, the original would be able to create some pretty strong small tokens.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think people are much more interested in the Steadfast rather than Dawn of the Abzan, which is kind of a shame because like you can make Dawn of the Abzan work. You're in white, so you can flicker it to abuse that ETB. You're in black, so you could like potentially kill this and then reanimate it a bunch of times to abuse the ETB. You are in green, so like you could what's that one, Temur Sabertooth or something. So like there's ways to put like a lot of +1/+1 counters on each of your creatures, but yeah, really just the big butts deck. People really like to say, oh, I have a big butts deck. Turn all of my defenders into like huge beat sticks and just like, I think this really does blow Doran the Siege Tower and Arcades the Strategist out of the water, and this is now like the pinnacle of toughness matters. Alright, moving right along. We are now moving into Sultai, so that means black, green, blue. This character is, help me out here, guy. I think it's Cautus.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Alright, we're gonna go with Cautus. So, there's Sibsig Champion, black, green, blue, legendary creature, zombie warrior, 3/3. Once during each of your turns, you may cast a creature spell from your graveyard by exiling 3 other cards from your graveyard in addition to paying its other costs. Whenever one or more creatures you control enter, if one or more of them entered from a graveyard or was cast from a graveyard, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Cautus. I don't really think that's that stellar. So let's move on to the other one. There's Cautus the Fang Keeper. 1 black, green, blue. Legendary creature, zombie warrior. It's a 2/1, so you might be thinking 4 mana 2/1, that's kind of bad. But wait, it has indestructible, so that kind of makes up for it. And then there's even more text. Whenever Cautus deals damage to a player, exile the top X cards of their library, where X is the amount of damage dealt. You may cast any number of spells with mana value X or less from among them without paying their mana costs. So I think the Fang Keeper is a much more enticing and intriguing design to players. It's sort of like Villainous Wealth, where you're exiling things from the top of their library, and in proportion to Cautus's power, you're going to be able to go that deep and also cast spells of mana value that or less, and that's very intriguing to players. I bet some people are going to try to buff up Cautus and just play opponents' decks and beat them with their own decks.
Yeah, I think... Well, so notably it is combat damage from Cautus.
Yes.
So you probably want to be using a lot of the like small blue spells that are going to be able to give it some type of evasion. and you might be going like kind of a Voltron type strategy. Just, you know, you're going to be able to play these for free, so you want to make this as big as possible. The hard part though is, like, you know, you don't know what you're going to get, and you know, your opponents are playing cards that might not matter to you as much. But yeah, there is, I think it was the Gaunty from Outlaws of Thunder Junction who, you know, cared a lot about being able to play cards that you don't own. Yeah, so Gaunty Canny Acquisitor, who says like spells you cast but don't own cost 1 less to cast. So I think that this card is either like really good in that type of deck, or maybe that card is good for this type of deck. Like, I think this is a new thing that they're doing for Sultai, like just playing cards that, you know, you don't own, and, you know, encouraging that, playing your opponent's decks.
Yeah, to be fair, I feel like WotC's gotten into that design space, not just of the Sultai color identity, but a lot of color identities where it's like playing your opponent's decks and trying to find the fun social dynamic in which to do it, instead of the unfun way like Turgrid.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Anyways, we've got 2 commanders left.
Yeah, so this first one is Elsha Threefold Master, who is Jeskai, blue, red, white, legendary creature, Jin Monk, trample, prowess, and whenever Elsha deals combat damage to a player, create that many +1/+1 white monk creature tokens with prowess. So I think kind of similar, go a Voltron type strategy, make Elsha pretty big, cast a lot of spells. You can kind of like almost double up with, like, you know, giving her buffs, and that triggers prowess. So make a bunch of tokens, use those tokens with like impact tremors, Perforos, or again things like Goblin Bombardment that you can then, you know, deal a bunch of damage with.
Mm-hmm. I have 2 things to say about this card. First, I think this is a really cool card, and I hope people play it. Second, this is going to be a nightmare to keep track of in paper, in terms of like the number of tokens you have, and they're like, because they have prowess, you got to keep track of like the +1/+1 counters on them. So if you're going to play this in paper, I encourage you to be like a moderate to experienced player. This is not a beginner friendly commander. It's going to be really overwhelming to keep track of. So just be warned about that, right?
Yeah.
I've said my piece. Yeah, I just would hate for new players to see this and see how cool it is, which it is, and then be like, oh fuck, this is such a headache to keep track of everything. Yeah. Alright, last we have Narset. Good old Narset. This is Jeskai Waymaster. Blue, red, white, legendary creature, human monk, 3/4. At the beginning of your end step, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw cards equal to the number of spells you've cast this turn. Alright, so this is Return of Narset. We've seen her on a bunch of different cards. Oftentimes quite powerful cards. There's been like the original Narset Enlightened Master, which is the bane of like every OG Commander player back in like the mid 2010s, and like their fear of her like hexproof and just free casting things. There's like there's like Narset Parter of Veils, which is just like a really good planeswalker for once. Just Narset's just a great character. And then this one's also quite powerful too. It's easy to cast. You might read the first half of this like text and be like, what? I don't want to discard my hand. But then you realize, oh, I can refill it based on like all the many spells I've been casting. Well, this is like Song of Creation, but on a commander. This is like, okay, it's not exactly like that, but it's like, wow, it's such a storm-friendly, like Spellslinger-y Jeskai deck.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think, you know, people love Narset as a character, but oftentimes like hate some of her cards just because they tend to be really good.
It's a love-hate thing.
So I think yeah, I think this is a great way of having like a middle ground. If you love this character, this is a pretty good card, but it's also not going to be, overbearing like some of the other Narsets have been in the past.
Right, and so keen-eyed listeners may be like, well, there's more commanders, there's all the dragon ones. Yes, and a reminder, we will be talking about that in part 2, our dragon episode. But for now, we're going to move into the 99. And as usual, we try to address any cycles right from the beginning. So if you've gone through the set, you'll notice there's a Will of the... and then a clan name. So there's Will of the Mardu, Will of the Jeskai, Will of the Sultai, one for each of those clans. And so, Guy, what do you think? Should we try and read each and every one of them, or should we try and kind of give a summary of each one?
I can give a pretty good summary of each one. So they each have the text, choose one if you control a commander. As you cast a spell, you may choose both instead. So very, very similar. In fact, exactly the same as the original Will cycle that we got from the Commander Legends. So Will of Mardu, 2 white, basically create a number 1/1 red warrior, creature tokens equal to the number of creatures a player controls, and then also deal damage to target creature equal to the number of creatures you control. Jeskai is 3 red. Each player may discard their hand and draw 5 cards. Each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback. Flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. Sultai, 4 green. Target player mills 3 cards. Return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Put X+1/+1 counters on target creature, where X is the number of lands you control. Gains trample. Will of the end until end of turn. Obzon, 3 black. Any number of target opponents. Each sacrifice a creature with the greatest power among creatures that player controls and loses 3 life. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And Teamer, 5 blue. Create a token that's a copy of a permanent, except it's a 4/4 dragon creature with flying in addition to its other types. Target player draws cards equal to the greatest mana value among permanents you control. And all of them are sorceries except Will of the Mardu, which is an instant. Yeah. I think this go around, these all seem... I think none of them are busted like Jessica's Will.
Right.
But I think from a power level standpoint, all these are more generally playable than the original cycle. I feel like the original cycle, Akroma's Will and Jeskai's Will were the really, really good ones.
Yeah.
With Jeskai's Will actually being the best of the best. These, I think, are all better than the other 3 that I didn't mention, but not quite. I mean, they might be on Akroma's Will power level, and I think that's the sweet spot. They're not, yeah.
Overall, I feel like you and I are in a similar spot where this cycle's actually pretty decent. They're not busted, which is actually a good thing. But the fact that you can choose at least one, and between the 2 options, there's usually one of them that's yeah, this is pretty good value for given the cost. And not to mention certain cards in this cycle parallel other cards that are just very, very strong, like that second part of the red one, the Jeskai one. That's basically a blue-red player's wet dream, of I forget, Mizzix Mastery or something. A number of these effects are just well-known, well-played commander cards, and it's one of 2 options. And yeah, I'm pretty high on this cycle. They're pretty good.
Yeah, we do have one other cycle we'll talk about later, but those are multicolor enchantments. But all of these can be found in the commander decks, so each one got one. And yeah, I think overall pretty happy with them.
Yep. All right, with that said, now I think we're ready to move into the 99 cards in white, blue, black, red, green colorless order. Guy, do you want to start this one off, or do you want me to do this?
Yeah, I'm pretty high on this one. This
Go for it
is
then.
Elspeth Stormslayer, 3 white, legendary planeswalker Elspeth. So, new Elspeth card. Haven't seen her since March of the Machines.
I mean, I feel like we saw her
And-
recently. That seems recent.
She's been in the story here and there, but this is like her first card since then.
That's fair.
Yeah. So static ability. If one or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. Have a +1, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. A 0, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Those creatures gain flying until end of turn. Until end of next turn. Your next turn. And -3, destroy target creature an opponent controls with mana value 3 or greater. And she's 5 mana. So, okay, this is pretty insane, I think. Because, one, you can use all of these abilities right off the bat. The +1 basically says create 2 soldier tokens instead. And, I mean, the 0 is, like, pretty crazy as well. Buff up all your creatures. They also gain flying until your next turn. So,
I
I
overlooked that part.
hold up. Yeah. I think this is up there in like terms of strongest mono white planeswalkers we've ever seen. This is crazy. It's very good.
It's very good. I mean, I agree. Like, the static ability alone being basically another Anointed Procession or another Mondrak Glory Dominus or basically another white card that allows your token production to be multiplied. Very good. And like you said, you can activate any of these abilities because you start off at fucking 5 loyalty. And like, maybe the ultimate of -3 isn't the strongest in the world of Planeswalker Ultimates, but it still stands. Like, you could use it right away. Any of these abilities. And so like the sheer flexibility on this between the static and the activated abilities is pretty dumbfounding. I wonder if we'll see more of this design going forward, not only of the static ability. I think we all understand that that's Planeswalker design we're going to see more and more going forward, but I'm curious if we're going to see more Planeswalker design of it comes in with starting loyalty that immediately can use the ultimate, because we don't see that often.
No, we don't. And, I mean, yeah, this is just very good. It does seem like, we're giving white the ability just to create more tokens. This also does say any token. It's not limited to creature tokens.
Oh, that's true.
But-
I overlooked that too.
So, treasure tokens, Smothering Tithe, things like that.
You got me there. I will say, I'm also pretty excited about this next card.
Read it.
This is Voice of Victory. It is 1 and a white for a 1/3 creature human bard. It has Mobilize 2, so remember, you're creating 2 tapped and attacking 1/1 red warrior creature tokens, sacrificing them at the beginning of the next end step. And the most important line of text is your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. So, this kind of comes in a long history of small white creatures that basically say your opponents can't cast spells during your turn or do or activate things on your turn. So like the original is like Grand Abolisher, which is like 2 white mana and like kind of stops your opponents from doing quote unquote everything. Not technically everything, but pretty much everything relevant in Commander format. Then they also, a couple years later, we got like Myrel, Shield of Argive. And then we also got, I think it's Ranger Captain of Eos, the one that searches but also can sacrifice itself to basically be a silence effect. Then we also got Kutzel, Malamut Exemplar. That one's technically green and white, but the point still stands where it's basically saying your opponents can't cast spells during your turn, which is very powerful. And I keep saying this is powerful. I think this is powerful both in like the lower power level pods, but also specifically in the EDH metas, which really crave this effect so that they are basically like protected to like pop off and combo or just go for the win on their turn. Notably, like I've heard a lot of EDH players talk about Voice of Victory going in where one of their commanders is Timna the Weaver, because Timna the Weaver is one of the strongest commanders when it comes to the CEDH meta, and like Timna the Weaver inherently drawing you cards based on like bodies you have, and this has Mobilize 2, so that the Mobilize 2 actually does factor into being another positive thing about this card. There's lots of thoughts I have about this card, but overall strong. I think this is one of arguably the strongest cards in the set, technically, from like at least a CDH perspective.
Yes, I think I agree with that.
Yeah, I won't beat a dead horse. We can move on to the next card.
So next card is Anok Strike Leader, 1 white, creature, dog warrior. Whenever you attack with this creature and or your commander, for each opponent, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token that's tapped and attacking that player. And then you can sacrifice this creature. Creature tokens you control gain indestructible until end of turn. So this does a lot for just being on a 2 mana value creature. Probably going to be able to create 3 tokens on your third turn if you attack. So that's pretty good. And like we just said, white is getting more of those. If you create 1 or more tokens, create more of those instead. So, if you had an Elspeth out and you had this, you wouldn't create 1 red goblin for each opponent. You would create 2 red goblins that are both tapped and attacking that opponent. So yeah, I really like this card. I also think the sacrifice this creature tokens you gain indestructible until end of turn. It reminds me a lot of, looking it up now because it's in my deck, I think it's Grand Crescendo, which is a X white spell that basically can give your tokens indestructible, or maybe it's all creatures you control. Yep, Grand Crescendo. Yeah, so very good. I think, yeah, big on this card.
I think you pretty much hit it right on the head. Yep. I think the only thing I can say is the art is epic because it's like a dog riding a cat.
Yes.
I'm helping. No, but seriously, it's a good card, especially for token decks and token generation. This next card, no surprise, I'm really excited about because it's an enchantment. This is Aligned Heart. It is 2 and a white for an enchantment that says Flurry. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, put a rally counter on this enchantment. Then create a 1/1 white monk creature token with prowess for each rally counter on it. So, like, this is easy to cast enchantment that I think goes in like Pillow Fort decks, because there's so many like enchantments that create bodies when you do things, especially cast enchantments, and so I think this kind of fits into that category. But on top of that, I think it also fits into like a newer-ish design that WotC seems to be doing with enchantments, where it's like putting certain types of counters on the enchantment itself, and then based on the wording, like that then has that counter being on that enchantment has an effect on what the card does. I'm also thinking about cards such as Boon of the Spirit Realm and also Charitable Levy, where like these effects are putting a certain type of counter on the enchantment itself and then like having an effect because of that. And that seems to be more recent design, and I don't know, I have done this long enough where I feel like maybe this is the start of something where they're going to keep doing something like this. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think it's... I think this card's pretty good. I do also like, again, just talking about Flurry in general, it's whenever you cast your second spell each turn. So, if you're able to cast 2 spells on an opponent's turn, you could also use this defensively, being like, okay, 1, 2, and then you trigger this. Maybe you create a bunch of like blockers that they weren't expecting.
Yeah, that's true at instant speed. And also, just to actually clarify, like the way this card works, it's like, okay, you cast your second spell a turn, you put a rally counter, you make like 1/1/1, and then maybe some time passes. Oh, you cast your second spell on a different turn. Now you have 2 rally counters, so you're going 1 token, then 2 tokens, then 3, then 4. So like, it's like not just like linear. It's almost like I don't think it's logarithmic, but it's like the body's out of fast is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
Yeah. Ooh, this next card's really interesting.
Yeah, this is Iron Will Forger, 3 white, creature, Orc Artificer. It has Lieutenant, which we don't see a ton of, but at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control your commander, target non-legendary creature you control gains Myriad until end of turn. So, once again, it's definitely white, token-faced, or like token-heavy. I think pretty good in if you control your commander, target non-legendary creature you control. Okay, so you can't copy, I guess, something else to give it Myriad. Well, no, you don't really care about that. Yeah, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think that this is a good card, because if you look at the small handful of cards with the Lieutenant ability, sure, some of them are bad, but there are a few that show like merit to the mechanics, such as Loyal Apprentice, Loyal Drake, Loyal Guardian, where in the right deck, these are quite strong effects. And I think Iron Will Forger is no exception, because in my mind, giving target non-legendary creature you control Myriad until end turn, that reminds me a lot of Blade of Selves. And I don't know, I've played enough Commander where I've seen Blade of Selves do some really silly things, like truly powerful and bonkers things. So I would not underestimate this card in the right deck.
Yeah.
Ooh, I gotta read this. I gotta read this next card. Oh, okay. So this is Tempest Technique. It is 3 and a white for an enchantment aura with Storm. So you might be like, Storm? How does that work? This is a permanent. It's an enchantment aura. So say you cast like 3 spells before this and then Tempest Technique, you're going to like have Tempest Technique the original and then like 3 like copies be made that become tokens that are also going to go on that creature. So you're like, okay, well, what's the point of that? Well, it's an aura that goes onto a creature, and then enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each enchantment you control. So it counts all the other Tempest Techniques that it sees. And then, who knows, maybe you're an enchantment-focused deck like Blake, and he's doing dumb, stupid things in his Sigarda Host of Herons enchantment Voltron deck. And like, he's doing a bunch of bullshit, and then I cast Tempest Technique late in the turn, and now suddenly my Sigarda has like +20/+20. That may sound ridiculous, but it's not that far-fetched. You know, this card's, the closest comparison is like All That Glitters, where All That Glitters is giving you +1/+1 for each enchantment and artifact you control. This one's only enchantments, and it's a little bit more mana, but it has a higher ceiling potential. It's also comparable to Ethereal Armor. Now, Ethereal Armor is really nice because it only costs a single white mana, and it's giving +1/+1 for each enchantment you control. And so, like, it's a lower floor, but also has a lower ceiling. Then there's also Sage's Reverie, which is like the same casting cost as this, and like Sage's Reverie has the nice effect of like drawing you cards, but like, let's be real, you're playing Enchantress probably, so you're already drawing plenty of cards. So like, this card, like in the right deck, specifically like an enchantment deck or Pillow Fort deck, like I can see this like being a powerhouse. It also reminds me of Ancestral Mask, which is 2 and a green, and it's +2/+2 for each enchantment on the battlefield, not just your stuff. So Tempest Technique maybe doesn't have quite as high of a ceiling in that regard because it's only your stuff, but it's still a very strong card. I don't know. I could talk about this card forever.
Yeah, I was gonna say it only gets better because with one spell, okay, if let's say no enchantments on the field that you control, it's just this. So you cast this with Storm Count, nothing. So you only get this. You only get +1/+1. Storm Count is 2, so now those two enter. Each are giving a +2/+2, so now it's actually +4. And then if you go like, so basically it kind of is exponential. So then it goes to 9 if you have 3 spells, or if you get 3 copies, 16 if you get 4 copies, 5 if you get 5 copies, 36, so 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36 if you can get up to 6 spells. So yeah, I think, you know, even just getting this with like a +9/+9 is pretty good if you can cast 2 things before it in the turn. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's saying that there's no enchantments on the field, but in an enchantment heavy deck, you know, the 2 spells you cast before this, both enchantments, boom, that's pretty good.
Yeah, thanks for breaking down the math. I think I got a bit excited and skipped over that part. Yeah, it's a good card.
Yeah.
Storm's pretty good.
No, it's. I think it's very good. Okay, blue. Naga Fleshcrafter, 3 blue. Creature Snake Shapeshifter. You may have this creature enter as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, and then this has Renew. So 2 and a blue, exile this card from your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on target non-legendary creature you control. Each other creature you control becomes a copy of that creature until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. So yeah, I like what you wrote down here. Clever Impersonator, Rite of Replication. You know, I think you kind of want this to be in probably decks that do focus maybe on like combat or like static abilities, just so then you could like make the most out of it. You know, why not make every creature you control a Blightsteel Colossus?
Ooh.
Boom, he's in the set.
There we go. Blightsteel Colossus mentioned. No, this is
it's not a set review without Blightsteel.
Exactly.
Next, he goes to space. Somehow.
Oh my god, dude, that would be so cool. Just give him like a little space helmet.
He's already kind of wearing a space helmet. He's very much like a astronaut-looking guy to begin with.
It's a super cool card. Yeah. Backtracking a bit, Naga Fleshcrafter. Exactly what you said. Super cool clone effect. You know, we've seen so many clone effects throughout the years. It's sort of like, oh, another clone, yeah. But this one is very unique in its renewability of basically turning all of your stuff into one potentially very powerful thing. And reminds me, of like Rite of Replication, where like this is like potentially game winning if you have enough setup. Not to mention like the art of like, no matter like which of these original printing artworks you look at, like the body horror of the art is just amazing. Want me to read this next card? Alright, so really quick, this is Adaptive Training Post. It is 2 and a blue for an artifact that says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, if this artifact has fewer than 3 charge counters on it, put a charge counter on it. Remove 3 charge counters from this artifact. When you next cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy it, and you may choose new targets for the copy. So, you know, you've been playing Commander for a long time. You know about spells like Mizzix's Mastery, Increasing Vengeance, Primal Amulet, Reiterate, Reverberate, Bonus Round. All these spells that basically let you go hog wild. Once you've like filled up your graveyard enough, or you just have a large enough hand, you can just start doing like instant into sorcery into an instant, into a sorcery into an instant, and just like storm off and like win. Adaptive Trading Post probably just helps you out. along the process. Honestly, I'm at this point in history, I'm a little surprised that this doesn't just say tap, add a blue mana or something, like a 3 mana rock with upside. But yeah, no, this is a great card. Just sort of helps you extend your plays. And I don't think it's the most powerful card. I don't think it's the weakest card. I just think, oh yeah, this is a good support card.
Yeah, I actually kind of like that it doesn't have the tap in and add a blue. I know that's kind of been a trend of theirs to, make these like 3 mana rocks with upside, but yeah, I think this is pretty good where it is, just because in a way, by copying the spell, you're, essentially getting the cheap mana that way. So in a way, it kind of makes mana-ish.
All right. Now, with that said, I think we're moving into black.
Yeah. So, this is gonna be a toughie. Yathon. How would you say that?
Yathan.
Yathan?
Yeah, but that's probably how it's pronounced. That's probably more accurate.
Alright, Yathan Tomb Guard. 2 black, creature human warrior. It has menace. Whenever a creature you control with a counter on it deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. And it's a 2/3. Pretty sick. I mean, again, we've talked a lot about putting counters on creatures, and it doesn't matter if it's a +1/+1 counter, flying counter, any kind of counter. Just this is pretty good. I think it could slot into a lot of decks pretty easily.
I agree. Just the fact that it's so open-ended, it doesn't say a particular type of counter. It just says a counter, and then it's a draw engine. Like, I could see this seeing a home in a lot of decks. Yeah, I like it. Next up, we have another enchantment. This is great. This is Taval's Judgment, 2 and a black enchantment. Whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. Draw a card. That's pretty good. Create a treasure token. That's also pretty good. Create a 2/2 black zombie druid creature token. That's also pretty good. So, I really like this card. Like, it sort of reminds me a little bit of Sir Conrad in a way, like, because cards are leaving your graveyard, it's triggering some sort of ability instead of like dealing damage like Sir Conrad. This is giving you cards, giving you mana, giving you bodies. Like, you can't just like do this infinitely. Like, you have to choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn, but this is just, I think, a great potential engine card in the right deck.
Yeah, and there are tons of ways to be able to get stuff out of your graveyard, and I think notably, because I think we talked about this with like 8th Third Drift, there's that new god Ketramos who cares about stuff leaving your graveyard.
The really popular black and white one?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that this card is a easy slot into that decks, but you do have to be careful because it's whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard. So it's not going to see 3 cards leave, let me pick all 3.
Yeah.
If all 3 leave at the same time, then you only get one of the abilities. So you kind of want to like have cards that can
incrementally do it, like one at a time versus like big chunks of cards. Yeah.
So like as good as Delve is, you can do that for some of them, but like, just be careful. Mm-hmm. Okay. Welcome the Dead. 3 and a black, sorcery. Draw 2 cards. Then discard a card and you lose 2 life. Create X tapped 2/2 black zombie druid creature tokens where X is the number of cards that were put into your graveyard from your hand or library this turn. And then it has flashback for 5 and a black. Yeah, I think overall this is strong. Draw 2 cards for 4 mana. Create some bodies. I think generically a pretty strong black card.
Yeah, I think it's both a draw card and also like a token generator. And I think individually, like, there's cards that do the effect, but the fact that it's both stapled onto a 4-mana sorcery that's really easy to cast in the right deck, I can see this slapping hardcore.
Yep.
What's
our last black card?
Again, an enchantment. We're great geniuses for organizing the notes the way we did. Within range is 3 and black for an enchantment that says when this enchantment enters, create 2 1/1 red warrior creature tokens. Whenever you attack, each opponent loses life equal to the number of creatures attacking them. Have you ever just attacked into your opponents and you're like, God damn, they have so many fucking blockers, this fucking sucks? Well, screw them. Like, you can just have the later part of this enchantment trigger, and you can attack them and, like, make them lose life, and they can block all they fucking want. You're gonna drain them out. Fuck them.
Yeah, I do like how it's each opponent, and you're right. It doesn't really matter whether or not they block. They're going to lose life. There's also tons of white in black to, double up on that. God, what's that one card that Sheldon really didn't like?
Wound Reflection?
It'll come to me. Yes.
Wound Reflection.
And when I say it would come to me, I mean Blake would tell me. Yeah, I think pretty good. And again, this kind of just fits into the Mardu theme. I think that's like one of the better. So this is a commander card. Yeah, this is a commander card. A lot of these like cards that were designed specifically for the commander decks, I think, are all very strong. Like, I think majority of the ones we've talked about are coming from that set. And I think at least with like Aether Drift, and I don't even remember what the set before that was, Duskborn, like, even though they had commander decks, I think we didn't focus on those cards as much, whereas these commander decks have really slapped.
Yeah, I agree. These ones are going hardcore, and between everything I've heard from other people, I think that these commander decks are going to be very, very popular and sell very, very well.
Yep. Okay, so we're now in red. We only have 2 cards to talk about here.
Go crazy, guy.
Yeah. But don't worry, we'll have plenty more in the dragon episode. So this first one's really interesting. It's Sunset Strikemaster. 1 in a red, creature human monk, tap, add red mana, period. And then for 2 red, tap, sacrifice this creature. It deals 6 damage to target creature with flying. And it's 3/1. So it's an unconditional add red. Doesn't have to be like specifically like, hey, let's add red to cast an instant or sorcery, cast an elemental spell. This is just a mana dork for red. And when they showed off this card, they were like, yep, it's just going to be something that we do for red more often now. So, probably can see more of this in the future, with red getting to play in these like small bits of like mana dorks, because previously it was more of, hey, Seething Song and ritual types of effects where it's like big burst all at once.
Right. Guy, I know a lot of people have been like concerned that, green is green no longer going to be the main color that has mana dorks? Like, is this now going completely over to red now?
I don't think that's the case. I think it's more of a tertiary, secondary ability for red. Like, I think green will still be the best at doing it. Yes. And it's not going to go away.
Yeah.
But, like, red needs some help, especially in commander. So this is a relatively harmless way that they can do that. Yeah. And I think, I like it.
Yeah. Like, a reminder, the Sunset Strikemaster is 2 mana value, and like, I bet like every once in a while we might see like a single red mana add red mana dork, but like they said right away from like when this card was first revealed, like mana dork production and design is mostly going to stay in green. We're just going to get a few in red. All right. Next up, I don't have much to say about this next card, but I still want to acknowledge its existence. This is Transforming Flourish, 2 in red for an instant that says Demonstrate. So remember, Demonstrate is when you cast a spell, you may copy it. If you do choose an opponent to also copy it, players may choose new targets for their copies. And the actual text of the card says, destroy target artifact or creature you don't control. If that permanent is destroyed this way, if the controller exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card, then they may cast that card without paying its mana cost. So, this is in the long line of like Chaos Warp effects. It's less powerful than Chaos Warp because it specifically only targets artifacts or creatures, whereas Chaos Warp can target like any non-land permanent, I believe. So, not as strong, but it seems like over the years, Wizards of the Coast has been printing more and more of these like Chaos Warp-ish effects to give red more removal options. And we'll probably see more in the future.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think this is just really fine. Like, I like how it can hit two things, or you get to pick two things that ultimately, you know, will get polymorphed, but I love Chaos Warp because it can hit my own things, so using it proactively there. So to me this is like, yeah, it's fine. Like, yeah, not much to say.
Yep, that's really fine. Alright, we are going to move into the green cards, and then we are wrapping up here, folks. We've got the green, we've got the multicolor, and then of course the colorless and lands. So, we've got a few green ones here. The first one is Floral Evoker, 2 and a green for a creature, Snake Druid 2/3. It has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. You know, in terms of like really strong landfall cards, that's not that bad. But wait, there's more. For an activated ability of green and discarding a creature card, return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Alright, now that's actually pretty decent. Like, the fact that you can do this multiple times, sure, it costs some card advantage in your hand, sure, it costs a little bit of green mana, but like, it doesn't say like at sorcery speed you can do this at instant speed. Like, sure, the land is going to move from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped instead of untapped, but like, there's so many powerful lands. You got shit like Gaia's Cradle, you got shit like Cabal Coffers. Like, there's so many strong lands. I could go on and on and on. And like, this is Floral Evoker is like in the long line of cards returning lands from grave to the field, like Hedge Shredder, Aftermath Analyst, Lumra, Bellow of the Woods, fucking Crucible of World, technically, and there are a bunch of those effects. So like, we're just gonna see more and more of these, and it's like, WotC, chill, please. I think, guy, back me up here, I think Landfall has plenty of support cards for like the format.
Yeah, I think, you know, this is just another, like, it's pretty good. It's not the most busted, so I think it's kind of like, I think, so in my mind it's kind of like, you know, we have seen some pretty busted stuff. This is kind of more in the middle ground, so it's nice if like people are like, oh, that's too strong, like this could be like a good, yeah, let me not go too crazy kind of card.
Speaking of a more busted card, the next one is Steward of the Harvest. It is 3 and a green for a creature, Human Druid 3/3. When this creature enters, exile up to 3 target land cards from your graveyard. Now you might be thinking, that's a little bit weird. Why would you do that? Oh, there's more. Creatures you control have all activated abilities of all land cards exiled with this creature. So that means you have a whole bunch of creatures on your board. Congratulations. They are all, and you exile a Gaia's Cradle when this entered. Congratulations, all these creatures are now Gaia's Cradles. They're all strip mines. They are all Field of the Dead. They are all Cabal Coffers. They are all Shifting Woodland. They are all Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx. They are all blah 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 blah. There are so many great land options that exist and are going to. There are even more lands that WotC's going to print in the future that we don't even know about yet. Like, holy shit. Dude. Like, this is nutso butso. Fuck.
Yeah, I agree in the sense that, like, it's pretty nuts. I'm like, I don't think it's a card I'm necessarily going to play in, like, my land deck, just because I care so much about being able to recur lands from the graveyard. If I exile them, then I have no way of getting them back.
Yeah.
Which is pretty big for me.
Yeah, totally.
But I do like how this, enters, and yeah, let's say Gaia's Cradle. You exile that, all your creatures can now tap for, a buttload of mana, and most likely they've been on the field already, so, they can tap for it, like, immediately. I am sure that there's going to be ways to break this card. Yeah, I'm just kind of like, I want to kind of wait a bit to see if it's something that I might end up running.
Yeah. I think you brought up the most important aspect about this card is the fact that you do have to exile the lands. And that's a real downside. Because like you said, so many landfall decks are designed and interested in sending lands to the graveyard and then like recurring them back with cards that we just talked about, like Lumra, like Aftermath Analyst. It's like there is a real risk in using Steward of the Harvest to exile them, because as outside of like maybe one green card, like you can't really get that back. And so I think it's sort of like Steward of the Harvest is like a high risk, high reward, interesting design. And so for that, I do like this card, and like I can see how WotC could have made this card even more powerful, and I'm glad they didn't.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It is also activated abilities, so I don't think that cards like Field of the Dead would be applicable here, because I see that in the notes. But I think Shifting Woodland is like a really good example of like, oh yeah, now all my creatures can be whatever I want from the graveyard. Like, yeah, that's pretty good. It really depends on like, like not all my cards are about to become Glacial Chasm, but like I'm looking at my deck right now, and like, City of Traders, Emergence Zone, like now I can cast spells at flash speed every turn. Yeah, or just like fetch lands, like, okay, let me now sacrifice all these to just go find something like that. So yeah, pretty good. Wasteland, let me just destroy a bunch of my opponent's stuff. So, maybe I might actually be more high on this card, because yeah, of course I'm not going to be wanting to like get rid of cards like Field of the Dead or what was the other one I just said? Glacial Chasm. Like, obviously keep those. So, and it's up to 3, so it doesn't need to be 3, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So even if just picking the one best land from the deck, not having to go all 3. Okay, actually, I'm a little more on this card now. Talked myself into it. Might try it out.
All right, yeah. No, it's super cool. And the art's beautiful as well.
Oh, yeah. This next one, though, I think is, in my opinion, the best of the green cards, which is Nature's Rhythm, X green. Search your library for a creature card with mana value X or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. And it has Harmonize for X green. So it's very much like Court of Calling, Green Sun Zenith, Tooth and Nail. I like how you can search your library for the creature card, put it onto the field, and then almost immediately cast this from the graveyard, and you can use the creature you just got, because it's not like it's tapping. The tapping restriction matters for whether or not it just happened or it just came in. So like haste does not matter. So I do like that. So this I think can like kind of go almost get like 2 creatures. So like get something for like 4 mana. That's pretty good. And then that 4 mana might be like, you know, because green has pretty big high power. So yeah, it can just then go find something else.
Yeah, like I don't know, Guy. I don't think green has enough green tutors that search for creatures.
Oh, okay. For a moment when you said that, I was like, "Where's he going?" I think this card's really good. Why does he not think this card is really good?
No,
you're just being sarcastic.
Yeah, just being sarcastic, asshole. But no, like the fact that this is the commander format and we have so many green tutors, and even so, this is like pretty good. Like I think the 3 I compare it to is like it's like Court of Calling, because you're tapping your creature that you got the first time to then harmonize it and get a second creature. It reminds me a little bit like Green Sun Zenith because of the X cost. But it mostly reminds me of Court of Calling and also Tooth and Nail, because you get combo piece A creature and then you get combo piece B creature. And I don't know about you, Nature's Rhythm does remind me a lot of Tooth and Nail for that potential. And so it's a little bit frustrating where like, like I've played Commander all these years and like I'm glad the community is finally like generally moving away from just Tooth and Nail combos, and now it's like, oh, now we basically have another one in the form of Nature's Rhythm, and I'm like, I don't want there to be a resurging popularity in that type of card design. So I was like, if there's one card I could like get rid of from the set, it would probably be this one, if I'm being real. For that reason. I mean, do you not feel the frustration about like, you know, the history of like Tooth and Nail and like this card being similar to it?
I like it.
Okay.
So you're talking to a person who likes those cards. So it's like, are you not mad about it? No, I'm really happy about it. So yeah, I guess I can see where your frustration comes from, but like I also like it. So whoops.
Yeah, I guess we can agree to disagree about things.
Sure. What's the next card? Because now we're in multi. We're almost done. I feel like we've been doing pretty good for the amount of cards that we've had.
Yep, we're almost done here, folks. We are moving into the multicolor cards that go in the 99 that are not dragons, and there's just a few of them. This one I put on the list because, well, I'll just read it real quick. This is Host of the Hereafter, 2 black-green, creature zombie warlock 2/2. This creature enters with 2+1/+1 counters on it, but the most important line of text is this one. It says, whenever this creature or another creature you control dies, if it had counters on it, put its counters on up to 1 target creature you control. So, I don't know about you guys, but it seems like Host of the Hereafter is a continuation of like design that I see more and more from Wizards of the Coast, where here's all these counters of various types. Oh, your thing died, and instead of the counters going away forever, you're just moving them. So, like, the original is, like, also a green black card, Skullbriar, the Walking Grave. But then, like, in more recent years, we've had Resourceful Defense, or the Ozolith. And I think this one is also, like, the next in that design space. And so, I think it's good design space. And I think we're likely to see more of it.
Yeah. Next, we have Temur Battlecrier, who is Temur, so exactly green, blue, red. Creature Orc Ranger, During your turn, spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each creature you control with power 4 or greater, and it's a 4/3. So automatically, each creature you control is going to cost 1 less with this out. And if there's anything that we've learned about Temur, they like big power creatures. So play this. Most likely, you're going to be able to like discount your cards for like 2 mana, and you know what's like big and scary that's also in this set? Dragons. So I think that this card is really going to be able to like snowball, because once you're able to play another big creature, then you can play another big creature and another big creature, and eventually you can play Eldrazi for free. So,
and I just want to take a brief aside to say, like, there are actually quite a lot of 3-color cards in this set. Again, it's a wedge set. We couldn't talk about all of them. There's a good chance you'll see a lot of them like next episode, but there's also a chance that we just don't have the time to talk about each and every single one of them. Yep. There's another cycle that we decided to save for the last, and they're all like the siege enchantments, and it's very similar to the original Tarkir set, where like as this enchantment enters, you choose either this clan or that clan, and based on the clan, it's basically 2 modes. It has 2 different abilities. Guy, do you want to do your magic and kind of summarize each one?
Alright, let me do my best. Alright, so each one says you choose one of another clan. So Baron Steep is choose Abzan or Mardu. It is 2 white-black. Abzan, beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, or Mardu, beginning of your end step, creature deals. If a creature died under your control this turn, each opponent sacrifices a creature of their choice. Frost Cliff Siege, 1 blue/red, Jeskai or Temur. Jeskai, whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. Temur, creatures you control get +1/+0 and have trample and haste. Hollow Merc, black-green, Sultai or Abzan, whenever a creature is put Sultai, whenever a counter is put on a creature you control, draw a card. Then this ability triggers only once each turn. Oh my goodness, this is a much harder to do. Abzan, whenever you attack, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature, gains menace until end of turn. Glacierwood Siege, 1 green/blue, Temur or Sultai. Temur, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, target player mills 4 cards. Sultai, you may play lands from your graveyard. And Windcrag Siege, 1 red/white, enchantment, Mardu or Jeskai. Mardu, if a creature attacking causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Jeskai, at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. It gains lifelink and haste until end of turn. Okay, that was a little more difficult, I think, to do than the will cycle, but they're all enchantments, and yeah, I don't know about you, Blake. I think the big ones for me are red-white, so Windcrag Siege, and the Frostcliff Siege, which is the blue-red one.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree. Like, I think Windcrag, the Boros one, is strong because you basically are getting an additional attack trigger for just like 3 mana. I also think the blue-red one is very strong because it's like drawing you cards based on like your creatures dealing combat damage, and it also buffs them up with trample and haste and a +1/+10 buff. Both of those are good. So because of that, I kind of like Frostcliff a lot, but I also think Glacierwood Siege, the Simic one, is, I think, arguably the best because it has both the Crucible of Worlds effect, which we both know is a very strong effect, and also whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, target player mills 4 cards. That could be you or an opponent. So you could use it either proactively to like fuel your graveyard if you're in the right type of strategy for that, or you could just like mill out your opponents for a win con. Like, so because of that, I think the Simic one and the blue-red one are probably the strongest because both of the choices are very strong.
Yes. Almost done. We got one artifact and some lands. So why don't you read this artifact?
Yeah, I think people are kind of like overlooking this one. This is Dragonfire Blade. It is a single colorless mana to cast. It's an artifact equipment. It's a sword, basically. As you can see in the art. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and is hexproof from monocolored. Equip 4, but this ability costs 1 less to activate for each color of the creature it targets. So, you know, throughout history we have the sort of feast and famine, sort of X and Y, blah 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 cycle, and this is like clearly an homage. It's not part of the cycle, but it's an homage to that cycle, where you're getting the creature to be buffed up by +2/+2, and it's getting not protection from a certain color, but it is getting hexproof from monocolor, like permanents and spells, which is pretty strong considering that's a high percentage of the commander format, whether it's like a removal spell or just like a creature on the board. And then you may think, oh, equip 4 is too much mana, but remember, like, it costs like 1 less to cast, or 1 less to equip based on like each color the creature is. So like if you want to put Dragonfire Blade on your commander and it's a 2-color commander, well, it's really only equipped 2, and that's super easy to do. And then this is 1 to cast, so it's really just 3 mana. You've now made your commander hexproof from like most removal. That's pretty good. I've said my piece.
No, I think overall pretty solid. I mean, it's 1 mana, so like one of the big things I always think about with that is like Urza's Saga. So this could be a target to go find that and put this onto the battlefield. If you're going to care a lot about equipment, and or if you already have like your Soul Ring or like your Skull Clamp already out. So yeah, I think overall pretty good. And like, yeah, some of the best removal is monocolored stuff like Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshare, Chaos Warp, Fatal Push, things like that. So, you know, it's very good.
Yep. All right, Guy, how about you close out this part 1 and read this cycle of lands, but we both know the blue one's the best.
I mean, yeah, you asked me to do this, and I feel like that this is even tougher than the enchantments.
Honestly, like,
okay.
I don't know about you, but like, I think you could just kind of explain the templating of each of these and just read the blue one.
Okay, so there is 5 lands that each are of a color. So you have a white, blue, black, red, green. They say this land enters tapped unless you control a blank or a blank. So, for example, the white one, which is focused on the Mardu, its center color is white, so it enters tapped unless you control a swamp or a mountain. So, for the others, whatever the middle color is, and then it's 2 enemy pairs, if you control one of the others, then it enters untapped. Not gonna read them all. Like Blake said, I agree that the blue one is the best one. So it says when this land enters tapped unless you control a mountain or a forest, add a blue mana, or blue tap, the next spell you cast this turn can't be countered. Which, yeah, pretty good. Especially when we're, caring about copying multiple spells a turn. Yeah, I think just very strong to be able to make essentially 2 mana tap to make something uncounterable.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to lands making your stuff uncounterable, I think about stuff like Cavern of Souls, which is like particularly strong for like typal decks around a certain creature type, or like maybe your commander is just super important and you can't afford to have it be countered. I also think about like, what is it called? Like the original Boseiju land, Seiju Shelters All, I think. That one's also pretty good. I think that one has you use a little bit of life, in addition to like
pay 2 life.
Yeah, thank you. And I think like honestly, this one, Mistrise Village, is like on par with those ones, where like blue and tap, the next spell you cast this turn can't be countered. Doesn't have to be your turn. It could be your opponent's turn. It's like the next spell, it doesn't have to be a certain type of spell. It's any spell. It could be a creature, it could be an instant, it could be like a sorcery, it could be an enchantment, whatever. It's just so open-ended. And sure, like if you're a mono blue deck, this comes into play tapped because you don't have a mountain or a forest. But like that's fine. Like it's still very good.
Yep. I agree.
All right.
Okay.
Oof.
Yeah.
That was a lot.
That was our first part of Tarkir Dragonstorm. Notably, no dragons at all. And that's because the second part of our episode is going to be all dragon focused. So, all the good dragons, all the dragon support. And yeah, we'll also go over our picks for the commanders who are going to be in the top 3. And the 99 cards that are going to be in the top 3. So, you know, get excited for that.
Yep. I'm just so happy that we don't have to say, okay, this goes in the Dragon 50 times.
I mean, yeah, basically that'll be like beginning of the episode, just like, you know, you have an Dragon deck, potential consideration, easy. So,
nice.
Okay. That wraps it up. And any other thoughts, Blake, before send off?
I think that's about it. I hope you all take care of yourself tonight and had fun.
Yep. So, we are the Wizard Staff. You can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to leave a like and review. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky at WizardStaff101. Send us an email at thewizardstaff1011 if you want to complain, if you want to bitch and complain about how stupid we are. Thank you for listening, and we hope you have a great night. Peace out.
Peace.